everyone, and welcome to Gothology 101. I'm Professor M, and I will be your host today as we talk over the complete genealogical family tree of Goth today. Join me. Now, the first thing you need to know about the Gothic family tree that we have today, it was all started after the post-punk movement in 1976, and we call this traditional Goth. Traditional Goth is the basis for all of the Goth branches, and today we'll be reviewing 6 of them. So let's start off with number 1. Today I'll be talking about the first branch of the Goth family tree, and I'm going to be using this whole entire space as my blackboard. So if I disappear into the background, you'll know why. The first part is using the traditional Goth in 1976. We're going to break off of this into a form of Goth called Romantic. And an offshoot of Romantic over here is called Antique Goth. There's Antique Goth and Romantic Goth. They're almost connected in a very unique way, but if you follow up a little bit further, you will discover the Victorian Goth. Now, Victorian Goth has many offshoots. There is the Victorian, Edwardian, and Vampire sections of it. First of all, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Victorian Goths that are out there. Yes, I am one. And there's 3 time periods that you can fall into. Early Victorian, mid-Victorian, and late Victorian, which is my speciality. And then there's an off branch of this called Edwardian Goth. One might actually ask, what's the difference between Victorian and Edwardian? They're about time periods and style. The reign of Victoria was quite long, though the reign of the Edwardian was quite short. However, there's a lot of style and streamlined buildings within there. Let's go over here to Vampire Goth. Now, if you're a big Anne Rice fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, especially if you have some V-bangs. Going back down to the Victorian, we have a branch called Lolita. One of the most famous Lolitas in the world. You could actually see her in Disneyland or Disney World at the Haunted Mansion. How Gothic. She's on a tightrope, and if you go in the Haunted Mansion, as the elevator descends, you see a girl holding a small umbrella, and underneath her there's an alligator waiting to eat her. She is of Lolita Victorian fashion of the time. An off branch of the Lolitas is called Babydoll. Now, I have never to this date found a male who's into Babydoll Goth fashion. However, this is the 21st century, so anything is possible. Let's go back to Lolita fashion. I had broke off from the Victorian line into Lolita NuGoth. And NuGoth kind of spread basically everywhere. You can see it in shopping malls, and it became kind of mainstream. Also, we have Pastel Goth and J-Goth. Now, if you've been to the Harajuku district in Tokyo, like I have been, you will see a lot of J-Goth. J stands for Japan or Japanese, and of course, we have Goth as its entity. Let's go back to Pastel, and it breaks off into glitter and bubblegum. This is the first line of the Gothic family tree and one of the largest. Now we'll go into branch number 2. And branch number 2 is so simple, it's very easy to know. It's traditional Goth, and an offshoot of this is called Glam. Now, what is Glam? Well, we want to think of the late, great David Bowie in Labyrinth. That is as glam as you can get. So that is section number 2, or branch number 2 of the Gothic family tree. Let's go into number 3. Comes the third branch. It will be going back down into traditional. Some parts of this may be a little bit controversial, because I can hear someone out there already saying, I don't agree with you, or that doesn't belong in there. Well, it is just my opinion. It is where I have placed these strategically. From traditional, we have a branch called Mopey. Now, Mopey has an all-black feeling to it, where people dress from head to toe in pure black. And then we have an offshoot of it called White Goth. And White Goth is where it's the reverse, all white. And you can think now to Morticia Adams being over here in Mopey, and you can think about her sister. Her sister's name was Ophelia Frump, and she also wore white from head to toe and danced with a candle. Let's shoot up a little bit from Mopey to Metalhead. Metalhead becomes kind of the basis for most of the rockers in our group, and we can actually connect that to another branch in branch 4. However, we're going to let this just sit here for a moment. From back to Mopey, we have a very high cousin up here called Halt Goth. And Halt Goth is goth that has reached the high mainstream of fashion around the world. And many fashion designers have taken goth to a completely different level. Now, why should it be included? Because it is still goth. Going to Metalhead again, I would do an offshoot of that for all those beginning in goth and those who come before us. Speaking from an elder goth, the Babybats. I would take all the Babybats and I would put them as an extension from Metalhead. Okay, so let's now end branch number 3 and go into branch number 4. Branch number 4 is very simple. We start off with traditional goth again, and then we go up and we have Deathrocker. So from Deathrocker, it branches out into 2 more, Gothabilly and Pinup. And Pinup is one of our branches also where we've only had female members. I don't know if there was such a thing as a male pinup, and what would that look like. But anyways, these are the branches. Now you could probably have taken Metalhead and have pulled it over here to branch number 4 and have strategically placed it in there. However, I have left it very simply as this. So let's go on now to branch number 5. So now we enter branch number 5. So let's start again with traditional goth. And this breaks off into a branch called Fetish. And Fetish is very important because anything and everything that you can imagine and come up with in any complexity and any type of hobby or whatever you're into out there can be applied to fetish, okay? So if you're into, say, something like ballet, have you ever seen The Black Swan? Yes, that's very gothic ballet. It can be composed into the fetish scene. But I have broken it into 3 separate areas that were very distinct. So we have Cowboy Goth, which comes out of Fetish Goth. We also have Military Goth, which comes out of Fetish Goth. And the last one is, to me, the most important and the rarest of all the goth people that I have ever come into, is Mad Scientist. And I'm going to take a moment to just step aside and talk about Mad Science Goth. There is female and male versions of this. However, you have to think to yourself, all of the famous mad scientists, starting off with Frankenstein and going through any of them who have been wearing the scientist robe with the leather gloves on and the 3 buttons on the side and the goggles and pulling switches. Another famous one that I can think of off the top of my head is Dr. Finkelstein, who was in The Nightmare Before Christmas trying to bring Sally to life, and then he gave half of his brain to his wife later on. So let's go back to Fetish. There is an off branch like this to Cabaret and then to Rivet. So let's go up in Cabaret first. Off of Cabaret, we have a branch called Carnival. Going back down to Fetish again, we have rivets. Okay, I really like that. They be called rivet heads. There's all kinds of different words to say for Rivet Goth, but I just call them Rivets. From out of Rivet would be Cybergoth, and from Cybergoth breaks into two more branches, Corporate, which I practice daily, and Perky. Off of Corporate Goth, you have Casual Goth and Geek Goth, if you're into data 1 and zeros. Okay, let's go on. And the final branch, branch number 6. So we go back down here to Traditional Goth, and our first stop we are going from Traditional Goth to Hippie Goth. Now Hippie Goth breaks off into 5 individual sections. Our first stop here is called Gypsy Goth. We have Gypsy Goth, which then goes into Tribal Goth. And then we also have Fairytail Goth. Probably saying, what's that? Do you know Hansel and Gretel? Just put it gothically. Just imagine Hansel and Gretel dressed all in black. Now, we also have another branch called Fairy. And if you think about the people that have the pointed ears and wear the crowns, think Lord of the Rings with a gothic tone to it. And then another branch from Hippie is called Pagan. We need to go back to Fairy Goth, and then another branch comes out of that is called Mystic. And the farthest branch that I can find on the family tree is called Viking. So there you have it, the complete range of the Gothic family tree.